Welcome to Code with JV AI Snapshot number 8. There's a lot of stuff to get through this week. Let's go. Meta have released Code Llama. So there's been a lot of rumors about this for the last few weeks, and it is a Llama 2 model trained for coding tasks. Released under the same license as Llama 2 itself, which means free for commercial use as long as you had less than, I think it was 700 million active users in the last month. So not for the big competitors of Meta, but free for everyone else. They've released it in 3 versions, so regular, Instruct, and a Python version. Instruct is tuned for human instruction, and Python is for specific Python tasks. It comes in different sizes, so the 7 billion and 13 billion parameter sizes, you can run them locally on consumer hardware. 34 billion, you'd need fancy hardware for it, so it's more likely you'd be interacting with that through a cloud interface. But here's the scores they're getting. Nothing touches GPT-4 still, but they're getting close and better than GPT3.5 in some instances. The 7 billion and 13 billion parameter ones have been trained with infill, which means that you can start to have them complete the middle bit of some code. They're much more designed for live coding assistance like GitHub Copilot, etc. Great news for all the developers out there. 2 days earlier, Meta also released SeamlessM4T, which is a massive translation. Well, massive, it's an amazing translation model, which is really small. It translates between speech and text in all the variations for 100 languages, though for the speech output, it works for a subset, only 36 of the languages there. It's available for non-commercial use, and it's free, and it's out there. Their big model, it's about 10 gigabytes to download. They've got a micro model, which you can fit onto a mobile device. So all of a sudden, all the AI tools which were not that accessible to people before, you can put a translation layer in front of it and start to do some really useful things. They sound a bit like this.
Usisahau kama na kujisajili na kama una
পছন্দ করতে এবং সাবস্ক্রাইব করতে
N'oubliez pas d'aimer et de souscrire.
How good the translation is, I'm not sure, don't speak those languages, but this gives you an idea of the languages that are supported in the spoken output. You can start to, okay, I'm going to have to unselect some. This can run on consumer hardware. So you can start to run this locally to get a translator in your pocket. It takes a bit of time on the demo.
좋아하고 구용하는 것을 잊지 마세요.
Älä unohda tykkää ja tilata, ja jos
etc. They've got a GitHub repo where you can get access to all the code, all the models. It's got the paper in there. Also, it's got the on-device model, 281 million parameters, a tenth of the size. I'm super excited by this model and what we can do with it. Same day, and I wonder if they had an inside running, but 11 Labs, they announced that they were moving out of beta and that they're going to support 30 languages. You can hit their API and have it turn text into speech for you. Now they support more languages, but they will sound better, and you can clone voices, so you can have a lot more control over what the voices sound like that are generated here. So good news for everyone who cares about supporting non-dominant languages. Here's a great story of researchers who are giving a lady who had a severe stroke nearly 20 years ago. She was 30 at the time, came out of the blue. They've gone and put in an interface where she can think and turn that into speech, but also to facial expressions. I think she suffered from what they called locked-in syndrome. Her previous way of communicating was to move her head and to use the neck control she had to get about 15 words a minute. Using this approach, she's getting 80 words a minute, but also is able to express things in a different way. And so it's basically tracking phonemes in her brain. You think the syllables, stitching them together to make sentences so she can communicate much faster and easier. To get her voice, they took from her wedding video, they cloned her voice. So the voice cloning stuff that we've been seeing in other ways, there's how they use to give the AI her voice, and the same sort of avatar tech for expressions on people. They're plugging all of that into a fancy brain reading interface. It was interesting hearing them talk about neuroprosthesis as this sort of approach here. Hey, powerful use of the technology. This is an old paper. This is Mindvis. These are the people who put people into an fMRI machine and would start to say, hey, here's a picture of a giraffe and a fire engine, etc. Then just by scanning people's brains, they could say that you are looking at a giraffe, you are looking at a fire engine. Imagine being able to have a video of what you dreamed because AI scanned your brain while you were dreaming, which seemed a bit disconcerting for some folks. The brain interface things, they're starting to build that stuff now. It's not unreasonable to think about people using this for augmentation in the future, as scary as that may sound. Okay, back down to earth. GPT 3.5 fine-tuning is enabled. OpenAI, they released this a few days ago. Just like Meta went and fine-tuned Llama 2 to make it a better coder, you can now fine-tune GPT-3.5 on any dataset you want. They claim that by a fine-tuned 3.5 can get as good as 4, if not better, for certain domains. But the most exciting thing, I think, is GPT-4 fine-tuning is coming soon. GPT-4 is currently untouchable. It is the strongest AI that people can have access to. A fine-tuned GPT-4 should be stronger again. My sense is that OpenAI's strategy is just to have the strongest AI widely accessible on the planet. I've heard people talk about how they're ready to do a run to generate GPT-5 as soon as other models start to threaten their advantage. Hey, good luck to them. Great to have that stuff available for people widely. For companies who can't do the fine-tuning themselves, they've partnered with an organization to offer support for that to get more people in there. Oh, I love this story. So Huggingface, they support everything which is about open access to AI models, etc. They have a lovely snarky language in this about Flamingo, which is a model which takes text and image and outputs text. It was done by the DeepMind people, but never released, never shared. GPT-4, do you remember the demo when they had text and images in there? Well, that's still not available. We can't access that in GPT-4 at the moment. They're holding it back for some reason. So Huggingface got grumpy and they built it. They're using, I think, Llama 1 and OpenClip. So it probably started before Llama 2 was released. You can start to give inputs, which are text and images, and have text come out the other end of it. They've got a demo which you can play with. You can start to do things like, is this image real, or explain this meme to me. So a little bit like OpenFlamingo, which I think I've shared before. But the difference here is OpenFlamingo had like a 9 billion parameters, and this one has an 80 and a 9. So you'd expect it to be a much more capable model. I had a friend whose company has a process where they get an application from people, which includes image analysis and text analysis. And a month ago, they're like, hey, can you help me with AI? And I'm like, nah, I can't really do that. That's more of a research project. With this kind of tool, maybe you can, particularly if you start to fine-tune this model on particular images and particular tasks. So this sort of capability really increases the domain of problems which is addressable by AI. And I think it's important for people to start going beyond just thinking about large language models, text calculators and text in, text out, because all of the stuff that's emerging, audio, speech, images, videos, etc. It's all of these multimodal models. I think we're going to see more of. They're going to become more useful and they're going to be more accessible so you can start to apply them for problems you care about. Speaking of problems you care about, here's a crew. It's a repo, got some stars, but it's 3 people. And they took a Llama 2 model, trained it on a medical dialogue dataset of who knows what, and claimed that this can pass the US medical licensing exam, which I assume is true if they're claiming it. But maybe the model is just really good at taking tests and is a very bad doctor. Maybe it's a very good doctor and it can take tests. These sorts of things that if you can't prove it's safe, you should treat it as unsafe. And giving medical advice, you don't want to be serious about that stuff. The idea of how to test if something is medically safe, well, that's a pretty well-trod domain. I expect that it'll take some time to go through. So while I'm not in a rush to get some medical advice from this particular model, and I wouldn't advise anyone else to, you can imagine a world where these on-device models have gone through the tests to prove they're medically safe, and they have got translation apps put onto them, and they're in the hands of everyone in the world. Because how many people don't go to the doctor because they can't afford it, or there isn't one around? How many people don't get legal advice because they can't afford it and don't have an effective legal representation? A lot of the benefits of our society and our civilization and all the things we can do are often held back from people who don't have the money to access them. I think healthcare is a really interesting example where this technology could be a powerful democratizing force and really help more people benefit. Inst-Inpaint is a research project where you can basically give a image model instructions such as remove the car, remove the palm tree on the left, etc. It's a very specific project. You can do things like remove the cat, remove the car, works okay. If you remove the cat, it's a little bit dodgy. You can't do things like remove the railing or the trees or the grass. It won't do that properly. So some things in the foreground, there's a GitHub repo. You can play with it and get access to it. Here's another one that came out recently, content defamation fields, which is essentially video filters. So if you think about Instagram and how you can have photo filters, well, this lets you have filters for video and you can configure different filters. It's a small model. You can run it locally. There's a link to their GitHub below. Supervision is another open source GitHub project. And it is a building blocks tool to help you do computer vision stuff, created by the folks at RoboFlow, a little bit like Koqui doing fancy text-to-speech generation. These folks sell computer vision solutions, and they've gone and open sourced their foundational technology so you can do things like here's a football match, etc. What it made me think of was like, hey, could you one day get that image removal thing plugged into this video stuff and remove all the ads from TV things in sports? I mean, I'd love that. Wouldn't it be great to see all the soccer players and like their logos stripped out? That would make me immensely happy as someone someone who's not a fan of advertising. But hey, cool vision library out there if you want to play with it. US judge has agreed with the Copyright Office, saying, nah, if an AI generated it, it is not copyrightable. It is human labor which makes something copyrightable. So I think we're going to see people adapting and saying if they care about copyright, they're going to tweak the stuff the AI gives them rather than just taking it as output. Unless this is overturned in a higher court or the legislators step in, this is what I'd orient it around. If an AI makes it, copyright doesn't apply, at least in the US. Fun project, Shell AI. If you're in the terminal and you've forgotten how to do something, you can use this and say, this is what I want to do, and it can give you some options. You choose the one you want. So really great for people who are unfamiliar in the shell and learning things. You can also imagine how you'd go about building this. You take the text, you throw it to a large language model, etc. Interesting, useful tool. Huggingface have released SafeCoder, like August 22nd. It was a busy day in a busy week. And this is for all the companies out there who want a coding assistant and they don't want to share their code base with anyone. You can basically have your own on-premise GitHub Copilot. They have partnered with VMware, and it's the sort of product which is like, hey, if you have to ask the price, you can't afford it. You talk to their sales team if you want to get access to this. And they will design you a bespoke solution and figure out how much money they can shake out of you. It can be fine-tuned on your code bases. It can be hosted any way you want. VMware is providing the hardware, so coding assistance for the big people too. And this is how VMware is getting all the gear, is they partner with NVIDIA to unlock this. So Huggingface and VMware are out there trying to get some of that enterprise market. Speaking of enterprise market, IBM, they've had WatsonX, which is their code assistant, and they did a release 22nd as well. Everyone's on this anyway. It was a COBOL to Java assistant. So specifically fine-tune this model to help migrate legacy COBOL software into Java, which you can see why IBM is in that game. Last one for today. AI first code editor, Cursor. It looks like a Visual Studio clone to me. They've built on top of it. Got some great features there. I really like how they've thought deeply about the user interface for interacting with AI during the coding process. And they've gone down the path of let's put a bespoke editor around this. You can start to chat with your code base. You can ask questions. You can have it auto debug things or fix linters, etc. Useful features in there. Standard pricing model of freemium. This was the first time I've seen a difference between slow GPT and fast GPT. I'm wondering what sort of deal they've done with OpenAI, if at all, or if they're doing some internal throttling around things and how that works. You can also self-host it and use an OpenAI key. So pretty friendly to jump in and play with, and I'm keen to give it a look and see what things do I want to turn into NeoVim plugins, because no way I'm giving up NeoVim as an editor. That's it for the week. Thanks for tuning in. As always, feel free to get in touch if there's anything you'd like me to cover or anything you'd like a deeper dive on in the tech here. Codewithjv.com/snapshot if you want the email updates. Have fun out there.